Jinnah of Pakistan by Stanley Wolpert. Chapter 6 Retreat to Bombay, 1921 to 1924. Jinnah's withdrawal from the political stage in 1921 left him totally preoccupied with the law. He poured all his energy and talent into his work then, and for the last half of his fifth decade devoted himself day and night to that demanding mistress. His quiet chambers and the bar became his protective walls from the noisy, muddy field of public life. Safely removed from the fray, he watched as violence and stupidity stirred up dark clouds of public rage and official repression. The death of his nationalist career in politics coincided with the changes in his relationship to Ruthie. Their lives were less glamorous now, less exciting. Jinnah was no longer the rising political hero. Gone forever were the days of his leading a charge up any town hall steps, addressing mass meetings on the streets named for Greek gods. After Nagpur, he aged much faster. The rakish beau of 42 was transformed overnight, it seemed, into an elder statesman, a careful barrister of 45 who had precious little time for the whims or fancies of a young wife and infant daughter. Ruthie tried in many ways to recapture his interest and attention, using all the natural gifts and allure she possessed, but she belonged to his Lucknow era, those days of heady promise and infinite possibility. That mirage was behind him, almost as remote and strangely romantic a dream as his London stage career. In temperament, they were poles apart. Jinnah's legal assistant in this interlude recalled. Jinnah used to pore over his briefs every day. I remember her walking into Jinnah's chambers while we were in the midst of a conference, dressed in a manner which would be called fast even by modern standards, perched herself up on Jinnah's table, dangling her feet and waiting for Jinnah to finish the conference so that they could leave together. Jinnah never uttered a word of protest and carried on with his work as if she were not there at all. She had not as yet turned to the spirit world for company, still desperately seeking friendship among the living. Spoiled child that she had been, once the center of her father's universe, having been cast out of that world, doubled her demands on her husband's time. She was obliged to rely more on his human support and friendship than most Indian women of her class, who usually retained the closest ties with their parents, siblings, cousins, and all distant members of the extended family, especially after becoming a mother. Ruthie had no one. Sir Dinshaw never spoke to her again, even refusing to attend her funeral just over a decade after her marriage. No husband could have treated his wife more generously. Justice Chakla noted, summing up Jinnah's relationship with Ruthie. Yet he could well imagine how the patience of a man of Jinnah's temper must have been taxed by so demanding, so lonely a wife. Jinnah's first public address after Nagpur was on February 21, 1921, at the Pune Servants of India Society, which Gokhale had founded. Each year, a distinguished disciple of Gokhale was invited to speak on the anniversary of his death. Jinnah launched into an analysis of the then paralyzing confrontation between a government which had persistently and deliberately followed a policy that had wounded the self respect of the country, and Gandhi's non cooperation movement, which was taking them to a wrong channel. 2.5 months of abstinence from politics had been withdrawal enough for him. He could not bring himself to follow Mr. Gandhi's program, calling it an essentially spiritual movement based on destructive methods, opposed to the nature of an ordinary mortal like the speaker himself. Jinnah made clear his own readiness to return to the public stage, but only to lead a real political movement based on real political principles. His critique of Gandhi, though scathing, was not totally negative, concluding that undoubtedly Mr. Gandhi was a great man and B. Jinnah had more regard for him than anybody else. But he did not believe in his program and he could not support it. Jinnah ventured to guess that were Gokhale still alive, he would not have endorsed this program. Satyagraha boycott proved less effective than Gandhi envisioned. British courts remained busy as ever, though some Indian lawyers abandoned their practices. Schools and colleges continued to function. Most trains ran on time. Jails were filled, police did not stop working, and the army remained entirely loyal to the British Raj that paid it. There were signs of seismic cracking in the walls of Hindu Khilafat unity that started to crumble with the mass flight of Muslims to Afghanistan in the summer of 1920 and kept toppling deadly communal rubble on the heads of Muslims who fought Hindu neighbors in the south as well as the north during the rest of the decade. God only knows how often I have erred. Admitted Gandhi by mid August 1921. Those who charge me with infallibility simply do not know me. Life consists in struggling against errors. Chelmsford successor Rufus Daniel Isaacs, 1860 to 1935, the first Marquis of Beeding, arrived in India on April 2nd, 1921. Ex-Lord Chief Justice of Britain, Viceroy Reading had much more in common with the fellow barristers like Mr. Jinnah than had Cavalry Captain Chelmsford. Before the end of 1921, Reading enlisted Jinnah's assistance in seeking to reopen lines of communication with political India. Jinnah attended the Ahmedabad Congress that December and worked with Bombay's liberal M.R. Jayakar, 1873 to 1959, and several other moderate leaders trying to convince Gandhi to call a halt to Satyagraha in order to allow all of them to explore the new viceroy's promise of full provincial autonomy and of a round-table conference to discuss possible extension of diarchy to the center. Gandhi pondered that remarkable viceregal offer, silent in deep thought for a while, as Jinnah and Jayakar waited. Finally, the Mahatma agreed to give Reading a chance to prove himself, but within the hour, pressed hard by the misgivings of his more militant lieutenants, Gandhi changed his mind. Had he adhered to his initial response, the transfer of power from imperial British to national Indian control might have been advanced a full decade and a half. Gandhi feared, however, that Reading was trying to emasculate him. I am sorry that I suspect Lord Reading of complicity in the plot to unman India for eternity, wrote the Mahatma in his private notes at this time. Was the 50-year-old Mahatma possibly losing confidence in his own manhood at this critical hour of severe tribulation? The Muslim League also met in Ahmedabad that December with Maulana Hasrat Mohani, Jinnah's bête noire, presiding. It was a low point in the League's history, for most Muslims either expended their political energies on the Khilafat movement or, like Jinnah and the Raja of Mahmudabad, abandoned the League in disgust at its uninspiring post-war leadership. The present condition of the League appears to be very weak indeed, admitted Mohani, confessing the League remains nothing more than an old calendar. Jinnah convened an all-parties conference in Bombay for mid-January of 1922, hoping to chart an alternative course to that set by Gandhi's insistence that intensified satyagraha, including non-payment of taxes, was the only way of achieving Swaraj. Some 300 political leaders from all the India's major parties attended the conference, including Gandhi, who participated informally, claiming, as he told the press, to do so only to see if he could bring round his moderate friends. The leaders' conference was chaired by Madras's Sir Sankaran Nair, 1857 to 1934, former Congress president, now law member of the Viceroy's Council, who called upon Jinnah to propose the draft resolutions. Those began with a strong condemnation of the government's repressive policy and an equally strong urging of Congress to abandon non-cooperation. A compromise resolution ultimately agreed upon called for a roundtable conference to settle outstanding differences between the government and the Congress and Khilafat movements. Gandhi addressed the conference, insisting that before any round-table meeting could be held, government would have to issue a proper declaration of penitence and retrace their steps. The Mahatma met with the subjects committee of 20 leaders to help draft the final resolutions, changing Jinnah's proposals enough to drive conservative Sir Sankaran Nair from his chair. The next day, when the new resolutions were submitted, Sir M. Vishweshwarvaya, ex-Diwan, Prime Minister of Mysore State, then took the chair. The resolutions all passed unanimously, but Gandhi had not yet abandoned his call for accelerating the pace of civil disobedience and considered the idea of a round-table conference for devising a scheme of full Swaraj premature. India has not yet incontestably proved her strength, Gandhi argued. 2 weeks later, however, the fatal immolation of 22 Indian policemen inside their station in a United Provinces town named Chauri Chaura by a mob of satyagrahis convinced Gandhi that his countrymen were not ready for a non-violent movement. Early in February of 1922, the Mahatma called a halt to the campaign he had launched with such confidence. God has been abundantly kind to me, he wrote at this time. He warned me the third time that there is not as yet in India that truthful and non-violent atmosphere which alone can justify mass disobedience, which can be at all described as civil, which means gentle, truthful, humble, knowing, willful, yet loving, never criminal and hateful. God spoke clearly through Chauri Chaura. Soon after this, about face by the Mahatma, Jinnah and Jayakar met with him, the latter noting that Jinnah's strong dislike of Gandhi grew more manifest at each of their meetings. Immediately following news of the violence at Chauri Chaura, Jinnah and Sir Harmosji Wadia's treatment of Gandhi was most discourteous. Little more than a year since Nagpur, then it was Gandhi's turn to swallow the bitter portion of humiliation. There was no sweetness, no satisfaction for Jinnah, however, in the defeat of his foremost rival. The collapse of Satyagraha, which he had anticipated, the violence and resurrected Hindu-Muslim antipathy brought him no joy, for all that was left of Lucknow and the laurel wreath of national leadership matched from his brow before it could settle there were ashes. Like those wretched dismembered corpses at Chauri Chaura, his countless hours of patient Bombay negotiation and careful Calcutta formulation of parliamentary schemes confirmed at Lucknow had gone up in the smoke of Nagpur's display of wild enthusiasm. For what? Now it was even too late to bring Reading round again to where he had just been a few months before. Why should any viceroy in his right mind negotiate a new constitution after mayhem and abject surrender? Jinnah's discourtesy to Gandhi was hardly surprising. By mid 1922, Jinnah was trying to organize a new moderate party from which he would have excluded Gandhi entirely, speaking out more strongly against the Mahatma. He invited Jayakar and Motilal Nehru to join forces with him in this ambitious venture, but both declined, thus leaving Jinnah isolated from his former Congress Hindu colleagues. The old ambassador's bridge of communal unity broke down. Jinnah's political isolation and frustration at this time were compounded by his alienation from Muslim Khilafat leadership as well. The Ali brothers and Maulana Azad considered him a spokesman for the government and virtual traitor to their cause. His only political friend was Muslim League fellow barrister and Sindhi Ghulam Muhammad Burgri, 1881 to 1924, who continued to visit him in Bombay, where they often talked politics atop Malabar Hill well into the night. Jinnah's former Home Rule Secretary Parsi Jamnadas Dwarkadas and his younger brother Kanji were often there too. Kanji, who became Ruthi's closest friend, wrote, "One night in May 1922, I had a dream in which I saw Ruthi lying on a peculiarly shaped old-fashioned sofa. And in that dream, Ruthi said, 'Kanji, help me.' Next morning, as I woke up, I remembered the dream, but I took no notice of it. The next night, the same dream appeared, including Ruthi's call for help. On the third afternoon at about 5, returning from office and without remembering the dream, I called at Jinnah's South Court. I had not seen Ruthi for some weeks, and this was the first time that I went to Jinnah's house without a previous appointment. As I got out of the car, Jinnah's servant met me and told me that Ruthi was ill. I gave him my card. In a minute, he came back and said that Ruthi wanted to see me, and I was taken to the back where she was lying. Imagine my surprise when I saw her lying on the sofa. We kept on talking, and Jinnah returned home from his chamber at about 7:30, asked me to have a drink with him and to stay on for dinner. I said I was there since 5 o'clock and I did not stay for dinner. That September, Ruthi left Bombay with her daughter, pets and nurse for London. Kanji sent her a bouquet of beautiful roses from Puna's Empress Gardens as a bon voyage gift, and Ruthi wrote to thank him from her P&O cabin before reaching Aden on September 25th, 1922. It will always give me pleasure to hear from you. So if you ever have a superfluous moment on your hands, you know how now." And she gave her London address, adding somewhat cryptically, "It will find me if I don't lose myself. And just one thing more. Go and see Jinnah and tell me how he is. He has a habit of habitually overworking himself. And now that I am not there to bother and tease him, he will be worse than ever." Her perception of his habit of habitually overworking himself, while couched in a wife's language of concern, revealed their growing isolation from one another, as did her coy reference to her own demands upon his time as to bother and tease him. A streak of grey emerged now from the middle of Jinnah's forehead, visual proof of how fast he was aging. He no longer sported his handsome Lucknow mustache, and pictures from this era never show him smiling. His dress remained meticulous, and it was always pinstripes in hues of grey, black, or navy blue. In September 1923, Jinnah issued an appeal to Muslim voters of Bombay. The duty of Muslim voters of this city who will take part in the election to the Legislative Assembly is to give their entire support to Mr. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, editorialized the Bombay Chronicle, whose board Jinnah chaired. Congress split into opposing council entry Suffragist party factions led by Motilal Nehru and C.R. Das, and no changer, non cooperators loyal to Gandhi. The Swarajists selected their own candidates for the general Bombay seats. Jinnah ran as an independent Muslim candidate, and his popularity and prestige within Bombay were such that he stood unopposed, and on November 14, 1923, was easily returned to the seat he had resigned after the passage of the Rowlatt Acts. Ruthie tried to see more of him after she returned from abroad, but nothing she attempted ever seemed to work. During that election campaign, for example, one afternoon as Jinnah and Chagla were going out for lunch, Mrs. Jinnah drove up to the town hall in Jinnah's luxurious limousine, stepped out with the tiffin basket, and coming up the steps said, "Jay." That is how she called him. "Guess what I have brought for you for lunch?" Jinnah answered, "How should I know?" And she replied, "I have brought you some lovely ham sandwiches." Jinnah, startled, exclaimed, "My God, what have you done? Do you want me to lose my election? Do you realize I am standing from a Muslim separate electorate seat? And if my voters were to learn that I am going to eat ham sandwiches for lunch, do you think I have a ghost of a chance of being elected?" At this, Mrs. Jinnah's face fell. She quickly took back the basket, ran down the steps, and drove away. Decided to go to Maglia's, which was very well-known restaurant in Bombay. Jinnah ordered 2 cups of coffee, a plate of pastry, and a plate of pork sausages. As we were drinking our coffee and enjoying our sausages, in came an old, bearded Muslim with a young boy of about 10 years of age, probably his grandson. They came and sat down near Jinnah. It was obvious they had been directed from the town hall. I then saw the boy's hand reaching out slowly but irresistibly towards the plate of pork sausages. After some hesitation, he picked up one, put it in his mouth, munched on it, and seemed to enjoy it tremendously. I watched this uneasily. After some time they left, and Jinnah turned to me and said angrily, "Chagla, you should be ashamed of yourself." I said, "What did I do?" Jinnah asked. "How dare you allow the young boy to eat pork sausages?" I said, "Look, Jinnah, I had to use all my mental faculties at top speed to come to a quick decision. The question was, should I let Jinnah lose his election or should I let the boy go to eternal damnation? And I decided in your favor." Jinnah never permitted religious taboos to alter his tastes in food or drink, but from this point in time, he was more sensitive to the concerns and feelings of Orthodox Muslims. Not that he abandoned his commitment to secular reform and national independence or refused to cooperate with Hindus, Parsis, and all other Indians. As late as 1925, in fact, he reproached the young Raja of Mahmudabad, who had by then come to think of himself as a Muslim first, with the stern, "My boy, no, you are an Indian first and then a Muslim." But now he would never forget or underestimate the political importance of his Islamic identity. Many doors had been slammed in his face since Nagpur, some on his toes. The public humiliation and personal rejection he had felt drove him back deeper into himself and to the enduring community that still valued his advice, that helped him grow strong again, but in a different way. A new phase of his political life had begun, a more cautious ascent by another route. He climbed very high, but too swiftly. Were it not for the hope of his separate electorate constituency, there might have been no return. This time he would cut each toe hole with great care, cleaving to the rock that sustained him.